underpinning this environment around the future of work, we have 5 generations coexisting in the workforce for the first time ever. We have the fastest growing age demographic are those that are going to be in the 65 and over. And we're going to see half of Australia's labour force being millennials by the time we hit 2030. So big changes are coming through. And I didn't want this to just be a PwC event where we talk about the content on the wall. We thought we'd bring in a panel of experts. So Dom, I'm going to start with you as our resident work futurist. You've got the title, so it seems absolutely right that we start there. When you think about work in 2030, what will actually be fundamentally different to where we're at today?
Hopefully everything. I think we've got an amazing opportunity right now. For those that still think about Christmas, 2030 is 3,000 sleeps away. Right, so it's kind of really close and really far away. I think if we think it's really far away, we might delay all the stuff we can do. You know, Ed sort of paid homage. There's so many seeds we can plant right now to build a better future generation, but it's planting seeds. It's not immediate gratification. Ed talked about technology. If you think that in 2011, Microsoft acquired Skype, right? Zoom's not new. So, like other versions of Zoom have existed for years. What's new is us going, we can use this, we can behave differently and act differently. And so for every technology revolution, we need a hold of people, probably of our generation, probably not you, Ben, you're too young, but of our generation to go, we need to change the way we lead and change the way we behave, right? And it's that unlearning that has to happen first. What about the past can we take homage from? Can we learn from our heritage? Because I think we can learn a huge amount, but every bit of data, other than the Fathom future looking data, every bit of data we look at is historical. It tells a story of the past, but I think we need to be braver, bolder, we need to explore and experiment. And if we do that in the future, I genuinely believe we could create a better future than the past. Hopefully 2030, some of the things we've got rid of, productivity as a conversation topic, hopefully has disappeared. Because we have over-indexed on productivity of people like they are machines for about 300 years, and it's time for a change. You know, we've elevated the conversation in the last few months on mental health, on wellness, on balance, on contribution, on effectiveness, on delivering value versus productivity, which is a function of time. Hopefully long working hours, the mystique around I work long hours, therefore I'm awesome, has gone, because I think we've over-indexed on that. We're in the lowest third, Australia's in the lowest third of OECD countries on long working hours. And since the pandemic hit, we've extended working hours by an hour a day. And so there's so many things where we go, they're fundamentally flawed, but you know what? We have a chance to change them. We can change the nature of where we work, how we work. We can build more resilience in our workforce, and we can build work that's more meaningful, where we have impact, where we have satisfaction and value from it, but it's not the be all and end all of why we exist. And I don't think that needs to be a pipe dream. I think that's something Australia's had in the past, but hopefully in the near future, we realise that digging stuff out of the ground and printing money, no offence to mining or banking, but they might not be the industries that lead us into the future. They are ones we should celebrate and applaud, but we need to rethink what it means to be a thriving economy. And I think if anyone's going to do it, we can. It's going to take a change of tact and unlearning some of those old sticky habits that might not be true in the future.
Thank you. Nat, same to you. 2030, what do you see is going to be different?
I think I'm with Lend-Lease, so I'm going to be very city and place focused, but I'll make my point through that lens, if I may. I think in 2030, where you work is going to be indicative of why you work. So I believe the next generation, inclusive of ourselves, because we are part of that next generation, is not as divided as Gen Zs and Xs and Ys, by the way, in real life, but our value set and our focus by 2030 will be a lot more purpose and principle-led, not universally, but you can see it as a thread coming through now with our youngest generations. I have 2 Gen Zs at home. They're teaching me a lot every day. I don't think they'll stand for an organisation that doesn't lead with why they exist. I don't think they'll stand for a place in which they work that doesn't stand for why it exists. Oh, you work in Canberra, that's because you're doing this. You work at Barangaroo in Sydney, that's because you stand for these things. And I think that's going to be really interesting to play out. So I think we see the surfacing of purpose, and without denigrating skills, but skills fit under that, right? And they fill those gaps, and like, what does that really mean? But I think in 2030, The physical places are going to be as relevant as digital places, but it's a really interesting question of where that digital, physical kind of interplay will come. And the purpose of a physical place, I mean, the whole purpose of my existence as leading future workplaces at Lendlease, last year I'm like, well, that's it. I'll throw in the towel. We're done. Everyone's at home, right? But that's not necessarily become true, as the city is a pattern of living that's been true for 2,000 years. It's been the center of innovation for 2,000 years, more than that. It's been the cornerstone of civilization. It's just the next evolution of it. So I'm hoping that purpose soaks through all the places that we work and the organisations.
It's funny what you mentioned there.
My alarm's going.
A lot of people talk like
it's you.
It's me.
Sitting there wondering, what is that
must
noise?
be on panel. People talk about
Forgive
like,
me.
is it digital or is it CBD? And it's like, why can't it be both?
Yeah.
Why is it this either or, this weird binary view we've got versus going, how do we create an end-to-end experience for our customers, for our employees, like an experience which is thriving, and then do that on purpose? It probably involves both.
Well, I think places of purpose are really different than places of sector. They're not the banking district. It's the district that stands for, I'm making it up, but sustainable futures. That takes profound collaboration across really diverse mindsets. Biologists sitting next to architects, sitting next to bankers, venture capitalists, and government sitting right there. That doesn't happen now. Our economic pattern of real estate doesn't allow that. Our planning, talking about policy, planning policies and tax incentives to get small, young, big, established organizations in one place, that's actually very difficult today. Proximity makes a difference for places of purpose. So, okay, we've got a blank sheet of paper. We're going to create the precinct of the future in the middle of a beautiful city. Where do we start? I'm not sure at the moment the economics and the politics of it is take a square of concrete and extrude it on a financial spreadsheet. We need to probably break that model, even if just at the edges, right? I think a little goes a long way in this space. And proximity makes a big difference if you look at some of the innovation districts in the world and how productive they are at economic growth.
And I think that ties into some of the research we've done at PwC, which is around the future of the CBD. We've got Jeremy and Christiana in the room who led a lot of the modelling on this, but it very much tries to challenge this idea that the CBD is dead. There's a lot in the media around that. Our point of view as a firm is that the CBD will go through a period of reimagination over the next 5 to 10 years. And so my thinking is that we'll see a lot of big corporates start to have a relatively smaller footprint in CBDs and expand more into the suburbs and regions. But what that will see is an incredibly resilient CBD look very different. We'll see a lot more startups, entrepreneurs, those who were previously priced out of the CBD actually coming in and undertaking tenancy. And therefore, there's exactly what you were talking about, Nat. There's that cross-pollination of different skill sets, industries, capabilities. It's not just dominated by financial services and professional services. And so there'll be the potential for a real innovation spike there. And then I think conversely, this emergence of the neighbourhood business district off the back end.
And that might stay with that theme and just move into, if we talked about CBDs, what about regions and regional growth?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting. We've got a lot of narrative about hub and spoke. Really, that's an economic argument of like expensive real estate versus cheap real estate. We want more cheap real estate. And we're sort of, I think we've kind of gone past that now, but that's where the narrative really started. Where it is now going is how might we enable the best quality of work and lifestyles and grow. There's a polycentric, I was just talking to Ed about it, polycentric city, but Australia can really be quite unique actually, potentially globally in the polycentric cities. It doesn't work in the UK where I'm originally from many, many decades ago. But because it's a highly populous country, but nonetheless, here in Australia with our big cities, the polycentric of Parramatta, Sydney and so forth, that's hub and hub. That's not hub and spoke in my view. And infrastructure will power more hubs. Let's get away from the spokes for a second. There's no such thing. Nobody wants to sit in a filing cabinet full of people in a business park. It's not remotely inspiring. It doesn't do anything that provide me a plastic desk in a quite soulless place. No, I just think we should throw that away. We want hub and hub, but also what I want, to your point, Ben, well made, was my community to be enlivened as well. not as a secondary hub, but as my community. And what we found through COVID was how great was it going to the local coffee shop and meeting the person who works there, right? They live right by me, that's fantastic. So community became enlivened. We are passionate about hub and community, or hub and club almost, if you like, in that sense. So this is a revival of localism. It's highly sustainable, by the way. Local jobs, fantastic, but growth of these secondary hubs has got to be key to that. And infrastructure joins all the dots without stating the obvious.
It may be a good one, Dom, just from an Atlassian perspective, the sort of work anywhere approach and the announcements that have been made. I know that's very much sort of anchored in the now, but do you think we'll start to see more organisations take that approach as we sort of look out over the years?
It's probably fair of me to say that we are very fortunate in Atlassian. We've got almost 100% of knowledge workers. And so not every industry, not every role has the ability to work fully remotely. There's a whole lot out there that are almost missed from this conversation that we forget about, and I feel for them. They tend to be the frontline workers who whilst we gravitate to the conversation about work from anywhere and I can work at any time, and you're like, there's a whole lot of people whose job is very physical who have to be in a place at a time, and I think, and we'll hear from other people later, we need to really value those roles. They are high impact roles. We've then got those that can experience some level of mobility, and what we found through our Team Anywhere announcement is that can be hugely valuable, not in terms of productivity. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. I don't know. I've not yet found a really good way of measuring it. But in terms of wellness, roundedness, work-life balance, engagement, level of innovation has actually gone up. People are feeling more compelled to share, to speak up. We've actually found that through asynchronous work, we're getting more interaction from people that you class as introverts, because we've leveled the playing field. So whereas apparently I was once described as an alpha male, it's not true, but I would apparently dominate the pen. I would stand at a whiteboard, and the thing is, I would leave a meeting, I'd leave a workshop and go, that was great. And I only heard from me, right? I didn't hear from any of the introverts.
I'm not surprised
it's brilliant, right? You may have been there, you may have not, I don't remember. But in this online world, it's actually become a level playing field where we use Mural a lot as a product. We're like, let's all join the whiteboard. We do that together. It's very even playing field. But also when we do stuff asynchronously, everyone contributes to a page. We then review that. And I'm like, the person that got to share that, they got to share that unequivocally and I got to read it. That's a very different model. And so it's taken a huge amount of behavior change. Like, we cannot underestimate the huge amount of cognitive load and effort involved in saying, I behaved a certain way in person, and now I'm in a digital world, it is different. Like, we have to spend a lot of time and energy unlearning those old habits, learning the new ones. But I think there's amazing upside there, and we're kind of sort of building the plane as we're flying it. We announced our Team Anywhere, anyone can work from anywhere, work at any time, and then we're like, cool, how on earth do we do this? And we're working our way through that, and it is complex and complicated and messy, but we are committed to doing it.
Can I add a counterpoint to that, if you don't mind me butting in there? I think if we replace the word learning from the word work in this conversation, it might be quite a different conversation. So I agree, I sort of understand how complex it is. Work from anywhere, the aspiration. But if it was learn from anywhere, I think, I'm not sure if you homeschooled your kids or you heard those stories. For the youngest in our communities, those in high school, primary school even, that was not ideal because of the soft skills. And Martin will talk about this later because I saw him speaking, but it's very interesting. And the youngest in our workforces, it's the same. So I found people within my team, actually, graduates we had, saying they're finally in the office. So be it. We have a choose your own adventure practice at the moment. We'll see how that goes. But they said, I finally can bring my whole self to work and actually ask in the middle of a meeting, I didn't understand that.
Yeah.
Can you tell me afterwards how that might work? Do I need to do that now? Because they hadn't had that confirmed online. So if we just occasionally sort of fracture the view to say future of learning and apply that to ourselves, I'm not sure work from anywhere is, again, it's choose your own adventure at the moment, but I think there's active management that needs to be put in place, and that's the muscle we've got to start to work out.
Well, and on the flip side, we've already said to people, you'll be required to visit the office at least 4 occasions a year for that purposeful collaboration, to build those relationships. You build those relationships in person, you break bread together, you hang out, you go for drinks or coffee or breakfast, whatever. You build those relationships, you can maintain them online. What I fear for, and I have a huge privilege, I've got 8 years with Atlassian, so I know a whole lot of people. And then someone challenged me the other week. They were like, how are you doing with the new people? Now, we've got amazing stats. We've hired over 25% of our current workforce in the pandemic. And that's an amazing stat. And then I looked at my Slack, and I didn't have a single person on Slack that had started since the pandemic. And I'm like, I'm maintaining my networks that I already had, But where's my empathy for those 25% of people that started that aren't in an office having serendipitous conversations? They're not having that relationship building and collaboration. And that's when the restrictions drop. That's where we'll invest our time in that purposeful collaboration.
But I think like what you're both talking about is something that we hear a lot from our clients is the complexity behind all of this, because I think some people are looking for a one-size-fits-all approach to what's the policy or initiative that I can put in place, but it's very different for different people. It's not based on level or how much you earn, or sometimes not even what role you do. It's based on your household complexity, the research Atlassian put out. It's your network complexity, to what extent your role is remotable, and a whole range of other things like are you an extrovert, an introvert, etc. So it's a really challenging conversation to have at the moment, and I think we need to stop looking for the answer. We need to stop looking for archetypes and trying to put people in boxes, and think about how we can try and embed that flexibility and mindset in ways of working.
Ben, I'm gonna throw this one to you, because we know when people thought about future work, and this is pre-pandemic, most people thought the robots were coming to take their jobs. Now they're more worried about where they're going to live and the concerns around hybrid. But we also know that almost half of Australians are worried that their job is at risk of being automated. Is it time for something like a robot tax?
Yeah, I think, look, in the absence of having a really compelling and clear narrative around our vision for automation as a country and as organisations, employees do have these concerns around the impacts of automation on them. And so it's something for us to think about. It's an interesting one because it's a balance. On the one hand, we want to incentivise and we really want to encourage automation because it makes things more efficient. When we have efficiency, we see an uplift in economic productivity, Dom's favourite word. So I think on the one hand, that's a real positive. On the other hand, there's a social argument around we want to make sure that organisations don't displace a whole heap of individuals who in turn go into cycles of unemployment and rely on the welfare system. So we do see countries like France and South Korea look at things like a robot tax. So if you have a net deficit, so as an organisation, you automate and there are more people displaced than who are redeployed, reskilled and retained, then you have to pay for that. So I think that personally, that's something for us to think about in terms of getting the balance right between encouraging automation but protecting that social imperative as well.
Martin might make an appearance. So given that we didn't have Martin or Danielle, we actually had the opportunity to interview them prior to coming today, and all of their content will be online after today's session. But when we think about skills, and I'll throw to Martin in a second for his response, the upskilling opportunity in this country is about, to close the skills gap, it's about 5.9% of GDP, which is about 200,000 new jobs to be created. It's a really, really critical issue. I got the chance, as I said, to speak to Martin. I asked him the question around what skills and attributes will the high-performing employee in 2030 have, and here's what he had to say.
Hey, Lawrence, I'm so sorry I couldn't be there with you and colleagues, but I'll give it my best shot. I think it's important to understand the backdrop to this question. You know, today's 15-year-olds will likely navigate 17 changes in employer across their working lifetime in 5 different careers, distinctive careers. And what's really interesting about that is it's estimated that soft skill intensive occupations will account for 2/3 of all of the jobs by 2020. And the irony there, of course, is that those soft skills are actually the hardest to acquire, but they have the greatest impact on career agility and mobility. And these skills include areas like resilience and adaptability, teamwork, communication, leadership, and of course, the list just goes on and on. So as we think about the question, there really needs to be as much focus of education on these soft or human skills as on the accrual of knowledge and its application, because it's really that combination of technical and human skills that we can evidence digitally and therefore discoverable throughout somebody's lifetime through their learning portfolio that will really make the difference.
It's fascinating. I always think we've over-indexed on younger generations, and I do feel for them. They're entering into a system which may not be fit for purpose, and I think there's an opportunity for us to take the fact that I believe as a generation we're suffering with knowledge obesity. Like every bit of knowledge I need is on this thing. It's on 24/7. It's virtually attached to my hand most of the time. So if knowledge is there, what's my superpower? It's the application of that knowledge. But our education system doesn't teach application, it teaches learning and regurgitating. So I think there's a massive opportunity there, not beating up anyone in education. It's complex. I think the harder thing is actually, and I don't expect any sympathy here, by the way, for middle-aged men like me. I'm trying to start a movement. It's not going to take off.
Good luck.
But the reality is, when I finished at university in the year 2000, I thought that was it. I burnt my books. It's before I cared about the planet. But I burnt my books. So I was like, education's done. I now work for 45 years, and then I retire and push up daisies. But it's actually the current people in work that are going to feel this displacement. And I think we're also the most ignorant to it. I think we're fine. I think we think automation happens to other people, or it's just low-skilled roles. And I think that tide is changing, and so it's beholden on us to go, not only how do we think about others, and younger generation are crucial in that, but how do we think not about ourselves, but our generation, to reskill and future-proof ourselves so that we can have meaningful work and we can have an impact on society and our community, because that's going to happen pretty quickly. And so I think reskilling isn't just the future generation, it's the current workforce and how we think about knowledge acquisition and application. And to Martin's point, soft skills. Right? Teamwork, compassion, complex problem solving, empathy, vulnerability, things that you can read about and learn. But the only way to do it is to demonstrate. And I think that's a lot harder to do.
Totally. I'm wondering in this conversation, how might we build a place that actually creates opportunities to learn those emotional intelligence? How might we create places that have community at their heart, social benefits or social businesses? Supporting small businesses because you're a big guy. I mean, in its own way, to be much more them than me, much more broad in your view, take your blinkers off, would be very interesting. And it's like you said, it's in practice. It's like that unconscious bias training that we all do. You do the course and then you just gave you a bunch of ideas how to be really biased. Yeah. Rather than actually, you need to practice it. You need to do it and see it. And someone in the room tells you, it's very interesting. So you need to see it and actually, it's done. It's not learned in that normal rote learning way. And so again, I'm back to my normal point, but at the end of the day, infusing our cities with much more richness on this front will be really interesting.
Yeah, we've talked before about how you have a safe space to practice,
totally.
Right? And what Martin talked about a lot, more eloquent than me, is the micro-credentialing. Like, it's not, I need to reskill, I'm going to go and do a 5-year course. It's, I need to reskill, I'm going to go on YouTube, LinkedIn Learning, acquire that knowledge, practice it in context, and it's happened instantly. And so it's a lot different in terms of its tenure. Yeah,
we participated in something in London, actually, called the Loneliness Lab. And it was a collaboration between the city council, the city, if you like, and a few authorities, the housing authority in that area, ourselves, engineers and architects. How might we design loneliness out of a city? And just that series of conversations created a plethora of ideas and inspired all of those participants. And the ripple effect starts from that point on. So, but it's deliberate participation. You've got to actually plan this stuff. You've got to do it. It's effort that doesn't have a straight line ROI, and it's difficult. So I'm not trying to make it sound easy, but those are the sorts of initiatives that we're very interested in.
Yeah, so I was lucky enough to work last year at the World Economic Forum on exactly this topic around closing the skills gap with different countries. And I think one of the interesting things that came out of that, every country was in the same spot, whereby there was a lot of finger pointing. Government was pointing at academia, academia was pointing at industry, industry's pointing at government. It really is about public-private cooperation, and similar to the Loneliness Initiative, how do you bring those diverse stakeholders together to take joint accountability around this? So I think that's one thing. Dom, you were talking about micro-credentials. I think that's another. It's a buzzword that gets thrown around, but really what underpins it is non-traditional forms of learning. How do I access contemporary, digestible, bite-sized content to keep relevant rather than needing to do a 3 or 5 year degree off the back of it as well? I also think there's something in there around robust and transparent forecasting. We've got the National Skills Commission, which was established, and that's part of its imperative. But then how do we use that to make really strategic investments around different places in the vocational and higher education system as well? I think sometimes what we can do is we see immediate shortages and think about how do we immediately funnel people through the courses now, but we don't see that return for 1, 3 and 5 years. So the more we can be a little bit more strategic around that, I think we'll see those returns from a supply perspective.
So just a quick example, 2 years ago, Amazon in the US set aside $1 billion to reskill 100,000 employees they were going to displace. right? So there's a real example of Amazon going, we've got these workers right now in relatively manual work. We have a demand for skills. We can see that future demand. We're going to reskill our current people because it was a damn sight cheaper than hiring externally, the turnover, the churn, the recruitment. And they felt better about it. And so they already had the people that had, as Ed mentioned before, the culture, they understood the environment. They actually invested in reskilling them. And so there are examples of businesses out there doing that and doing it successfully.
And we've done it here, like in Adelaide with car manufacturing and others. We've seen that when you take a long-term strategic approach, think about what's going to come in 3 years' time and start early. You really can do it and do it effectively. And we're looking at some other transitions we're going to have to undertake around coal or around the energy sector. Now's the time to start thinking about what does that transition look like and how do we support the people in it.
I posed this question to another of our panelists that couldn't unfortunately make it, Danielle Wood from the Grattan Institute, earlier on. Here's what she had to say.
So I would like to say goodbye once and for all to the systematic undervaluation of work by women. We have a very gender segregated workforce in Australia, and we see that female dominated occupations are systematically paid less than male dominated ones. And that alone accounts for about a fifth of the gender pay gap in Australia. So, for example, if we look around and we pick workers with certificate 3 or 4 qualifications, the lowest paid are in healthcare, hospitality, retail, all female-dominated professions. Workers in construction, manufacturing and mining with the same qualifications all receive consistently higher pay. This doesn't happen in a vacuum. It reflects the lower social and financial value given to traditionally female jobs. For example, research has shown that when more women enter professions, pay goes down, and the flip side is that pay and prestige tends to go up when more men enter. And this really comes to a head in the care sectors, aged care, childcare, disability care. When you have female-dominated workforces doing care work, which is traditionally seen as something that women should do selflessly, it seems to attract even lower pay. This is not sustainable. These care jobs are the jobs of the future. The National Skills Commission suggests that health and care is the biggest sector for jobs growth over the next 5 years by some margin. We already have staff shortages in childcare and aged care. Yes, we need to train more people, but having training places is not going to be enough if we don't have the pipeline of people that want to enter these professions and we can retain existing staff. And if we continue to pay our qualified care workers less than staff at McDonald's or Bunnings, this is going to be an ongoing problem. So I would love to see some serious policy energy concentrated on this problem. Yes, it's a question of fairness, but it's also a really important economic question. Otherwise, where are these workers going to come from?
I would like to see more diversity within senior levels of organisations and females, but also thinking about cognitive sexuality culturally as well. And if we think about your point around 50% of the workforce will be millennials by 2030, we need to see more millennials shaping what the future of work looks like today. And I'd like to see greater public-private cooperation around the skills agenda.
Fantastic. God, that was good.
You asked him for one thing, you got three.
Yeah, but I did it in 30 seconds. No, you got 30 seconds.
It's his birthday, so he thinks he's special. I want to get rid of productivity, full stop, but I think we can do that quickly. The real thing, I think, plus one to Danielle, the reality of this weird two-sided coin we're on, we know flexibility, this current modern ways of working, the definition of the new normal. We can create more flexibility, more access to diverse talent. Diversity is shown to increase profit and innovation. We know all the stats is there. However, in the month of December last year, the US economy, I'm going to use US because it doesn't offend anyone internally, the US economy lost 140,000 roles. What percentage of that was women? 100%. 100% of job loss in the month of December was women. And so we know that we're creating systems that give more accessibility. The reality is old habits are dying hard. Right? Women are returning to home for care reasons, whatever else. 1 in 4 women surveyed were thinking about leaving the workforce. And so we can talk about tariffs and quotas and how we're creating flexibility. If we don't act, we will lose that diversity, we'll lose the innovation, we'll lose the creativity. And so we've probably taken a step back 10 years. We need to do a step change. We need to leap over that and make fundamental change.
Great point, but over 30 seconds.
Yeah, just.
20 seconds. Yes to all of that. I really struggle with this question. There's so many things that you can talk about, inclusive of all of what you've just said. I'd like to see further incentive for our biggest organisations to collaborate with small ones, incentives to collaborate with our 5 or 6 biggest organisations 20 years ago, are the same 5 or 6 biggest organizations we have today. If you look at the US, that's 5 organizations of resources and banking, and they're now completely transformed into technology for the reasons that structural and policy and otherwise, and innovation is a big one. I think if we can incentivize our biggest organizations really to collaborate even between themselves, or most specifically, better invest in venture capital, better invest in science, technology, change the way we can actually really create innovation in our own cities. Let's structure our cities that way as well. Please fly my place flag every day of the week to pixelate our cities between affordable versions of everything, affordable housing, absolutely, but affordable retail, affordable workplace, affordable medical, affordable education. Density is our friend and proximity is our friend in this space to accelerate innovation. So there's a lot in that. I've said about all the words I wanted to say in a giant jumble, but yeah, that would be my one pick. Let's innovate, let's grow our economy in a new way.
Thank you. What a vibrant conversation. Please put your hands together for our panel tonight.